محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear professors, doctors, brothers and sisters, our postgraduate researchers and scholars, all the participants who are with us here at Ibn Khaldun conference room, and those who are following on the Zoom and the YouTube channel of ISTAC-IIUM. Welcome to this forum on Tauhidic Epistemology and the 21st century Islamic University. Brothers and sisters, as you are all aware, ISTAC has been promoting Islamic thought and civilization through many conferences, forums, lectures, exhibitions, and others. Alhamdulillah, we planned for a new series of talks and forum on Tauhidic epistemology and its implication on higher education and also on the university. As you are all aware, our new rector, Prof. Usman Bakar, who is one of the senior staff at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, who became the rector of IIUM, and he mooted the idea of Tauhidic epistemology and also the 21st century Islamic University. And we found ourselves at ISTAC here as the Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization obliged to open this discourse and discussions so that we see how we translate the big ideas of Tauhidic epistemology and the 21st century university into our university context and into our academic context. So this is the spirit of this forum, brothers and sisters. And Alhamdulillah, we have with us here today four scholars, Professor Jasser Auda, following us from Canada. We have Professor Murad and Associate Professor Dr. Nasrin and Dr. Nurul Ain Norman. And inshallah, we will go into this discussion and discourse related to the topic as I mentioned. We have also with us our beloved Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi will be our moderator for this session, inshallah. And I wish you a very fruitful discussion. And I think in the end, we need to see the way forward as far as ISTAC is concerned. What are the things we're supposed to do to move forward with this agenda, brothers and sisters? Go ahead, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdul Aziz. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I would like to welcome all of you who are here in this Ibn Khaldun conference room and also online and all over the world to this discussion entitled Tauhidic Epistemology and the 21st Century Islamic University Challenges and Implication. As you know, we have a panelist who is going to discuss on this topic, that is Professor Jasser Auda, who is now live from Canada, and also here in the conference room, Ibn Khaldun here, Professor Murad, Dr. Nasrin, and Dr. Nurul Ain, who is going to speak to us on the subjects. Let me begin by a brief background of the discussion. 1500 years ago, the Prophet came to Mecca. He did not bring science and technology, but he brought an idea. The idea is Tawhid. And that very idea actually gave birth to the scientific discoveries, building scientific minds, and build civilizations. This I call this idea of Tawhid is more powerful than atomic bombs. Create civilization, actually I say this on purpose, more powerful than atomic and nuclear bomb, because definitely atomic bomb is destructive. But the idea of Tawhid is constructive, building civilization. And not only that, that idea is being inherited, passed down to us throughout the generation from the 1500 years ago, 1500 years ago until today. And we're still talking about it. And today we have more than 2 billion Muslims around the world based on these ideas. It brought unity, it brought harmony, and it's brought growth and civilization, actually, based on this very basic idea. So it is very difficult for us to miss the importance and significance of Tawheed in our life as Muslim, and also in our context at the university. Today, we are going to discuss more important topic, that is Tauhidic Epistemology. There are issues and debates around this subject, but here we have an expert who is going to unravel, discuss on this one. Let us make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we may benefit from this discussion, and we come out from this discussion more knowledgeable than ever before we came in the first time. So let us, to begin the discussion today, I would like to invite Professor Jasser Auda, who is now live from Canada, to start the discussion. You have 20 minutes for presentation. You're welcome, Prof.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me and see me? Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah, we see you also and hear you.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala as'adi khalqi wa khatam rusuli Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. ورضي الله عن المهاجرين والأنصار ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. It is strange that I speak online to Ibn Khaldun Center, where I had an office just a few steps away. But inshallah, in a few weeks, we'll be back to that office and we'll be live again in Ibn Khaldun with all the beautiful seminars that we have at ISTAC. My greetings to everyone there and online. The topic of Tauhidic Epistemology is the topic of renewal of Islam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the hadith, he said, إن الله يبعث لهذه الأمة على رأس كل 100 عام من يجدد لها أمر دينها. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends to this ummah every 100 years those who renew its religion, its deen. And this ummah has this feature. This is not the first ummah of Islam. The ummah of Isa was an ummah of Islam. The ummah of Musa was an ummah of Islam. Islam did not come with Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Islam came with Adam. But the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam has a feature of renewal. Of every 100 years or every era, every century, there are a group of people who would like to look into the tajdeed of the ummah. And over the previous century, we had quite a number of projects of tajdeed that I do not see as exclusive or as contradictory, but rather dimensions of the same thing, of the same tajdeed. We have the project of the Islamization of knowledge in several versions, the version of the integration of al-aqli wal-naqli and integration of knowledge and so forth, the social sciences first and then all the sciences, etc. We had the project of al-wasatiyya al-islamiyya, the Islamic central path or moderation, and we have the project of al-sahwa al-islamiyya, the Islamic awakening, al-ihya al-islami, the Islamic revival, the reconstruction of Islamic thought, the Islamic إعادة التركيب وإعادة الصياغة. This is another project, and we had several of the major projects, and the project that I will be talking about, which has to do with the maqasid as a basis of renewal, which I do not see as different from the Tawhidi project, the Tawhidi epistemology. The Maqasidi scholars, all of them talked about Tawheed as a maqsid of the Sharia and a maqsid of the Aqidah and the maqsid of Islam. And therefore, they took a maqasidi line, let's say our Ustad, rahimahullah, Sheikh Taha al-Alwani, but he also talked about Tawheed as the primary maqsid of Islam. And therefore, the Tauhidic Epistemology, Tawheed al-Ma'rifah wa Tawheed al-Ummah, was part of his discourse. And Madrasa al-Wasatiyah, our other Ustad, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, rahimahullah, yes, talked about Wasatiyah, but he talked about the Tawheed, and he had a number of books. In fact, he has a series on Tawheedullah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the implication on education and science and knowledge from his perspective as an Imam of the Wasatiyah direction. The Islamization of Knowledge project also talked about At-Tawheed from the beginning, from, of course, the book of Sheikh Dr. Ismail Farouqi, At-Tawheed, and of course, then the work of Dr. Amun Abul Fadl and Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sliman and all of our Ustads from the Islamization project that talked about Tawheed, all the way to our Ustad, Professor Dato Osman Bakr, who is now the rector of IIUM. And therefore, I do not see that any of these projects is contributing to other projects, or I do not see the discussion with the lens of the relevance of any of these projects to the other projects, but rather that all of these projects are dimensions of the renewal of the Ummah, very important sides of that renewal. The side that I would like to focus on, that is the topic of my talk that is given to me, is the side of the Maqasid al-Sharia approach, or the project of Maqasid al-Sharia, and what it means for At-Tawheed as a ma'rifah, the Tauhidic Epistemology, or the renewal in the bigger sense of the renewal of this Ummah. I would like to stop at the word Sharia at the beginning and insist that the Sharia is not just law, even though we could call something that in Arabic would be called the tashri'a, or legislation. And therefore, the maqasid al-sharia in terms of legislation, or at-tashri' al-Islami, when we talk about the usual chapters of al-ibadat and al-mu'amalat that we know, the maqasid al-sharia has a long history of the classification of the different scholars, the most wide and popular of which is the classification of Imam al-Ghazali, and the most fundamentalization or ta'sil of that is the ta'sil of Imam al-Shatibi. And therefore you're talking about الضرورات والحاجيات والتحسينيات وحفظ الدين والنفس والمال والعرض والنسل and so on. And this is not just maqasid al-sharia, it is just maqasid al-sharia for legislation, for tashri'ah. But if you look at the Sharia in its comprehensive sense, therefore Maqasid al-Sharia would include other disciplines or other abwab, if you wish. If we're going to talk the fiqhi language, Maqasid al-Sharia would include Maqasid al-Siyasa, which is a bab or a chapter of fiqh. And therefore, when we look at the objectives of siyasa, or politics, political theory, siyasa shar'iyya in Islam, we are actually talking about Maqasid al-Sharia too. And it is not equal to Maqasid al-Sharia of الضرورات والحاجيات والتحسينيات وحفظ الدين والنفس والعقل. It is actually, on top of that, adds a number of other objectives related to a siyasa in Islam. Maqasid al-Iqtisad, if you look at the economic question or the economic discipline in Islam, the Islamic economics, now we call it, they have maqasid too. Ibn Ashur talked about it. Other scholars from the contemporary times, Muhammad Abdu and Rashid Rida, etc., they talked about maqasid al-iqtisad al-Islami. What are the objectives of the Islamic economics? And yes, maqasid al-Sharia, hifz al-din wa nafs wal-aql, are part of it, but they added a number of other maqasid. They said al-rawaj, currency of the goods and services and so on. Man'u al-ihtikar, the prevention of monopoly. They said it's a maqsid of the Sharia when it comes to economics. Man'i ad-dula, the dula is the monopoly of money between the rich كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. So they said that منع الدولة is one of those مقاصد of الاقتصاد. And therefore they call the مقصد that's called التداول. And so on. And therefore it is Sharia too, but we look at the side of اقتصاد, not just أبواب العبادات والمعاملات التقليدية, not just the traditional chapters. And therefore, if you look at مقاصد الشريعة this way, which is in the title of my input here, you will look at the Sharia in a comprehensive way. And this would be a Tawhidi approach, because a Tawhid is not just about the tashri', as in the ibadat and the muamalat in the narrow sense, but a Tawhid, and especially Tawhid al-Ma'rifah, the epistemological Tawhid, is about all aspects of knowledge, all disciplines of knowledge, all sides and views of knowledge that we can think about. And this includes politics and economics, this includes psychology, this includes the Tawheed, the natural sciences would include astronomy, or Prof. Osman Bakr has a book on an Islamic approach to astronomy or space sciences in terms of concepts, etc. This would include medicine, or in other words, this would include the 4 types of disciplines that are prevalent in today's academia, which are the natural sciences, the social sciences, the applied sciences, and the humanities. But wait a minute, this division of disciplines is actually by itself not Tawhidi. The talk about a 21st Islamic university would have to, in my view, go beyond the disciplinization that comes from a secular perspective. Because if you look at Islam in the usual division of humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and applied sciences, you will see that Islam is going to be very partialistic, is not going to be the hegemonic view and the epistemological approach, if you wish. You will find that each discipline would have its epistemological borders. And you cannot mix theology, which is Islam, with psychology. You go to a faculty of psychology proper, and you start to talk about prayers or fasting or any of that, and they tell you, no, this is subjective. Now, secular talk. This is going to be not rational, or is going to be contradictory with the positivist approach that a psychological school would take. And therefore, there is resistance from the current disciplinization of knowledge to the idea of Islam being hegemonic over knowledge. And to the best, when they approach Islam in their best ways, they consider Islam to be part of ethics. So let's talk about engineering, and let's consider Islam to be part of ethics of engineering, but not the falsafa, the philosophy, the usul, the fundamental aspects upon which we built engineering. Not the philosophy of design, but the ethics of design. And these are 2 different aspects. And therefore, when you build a car or a city, when you do architecture or agriculture or any of these branches under engineering, for example, if you're going to go with this classification, you will not going to think about these topics in a Tawhidi way if you divide them with their epistemological borders and consider Islam to be only ethics. We would like in the Tawhidi project to consider Islam to be the fundamental aspect of these sciences. And it doesn't mean that the Quran is a book of engineering or a book of history or a book of psychology or a book of economics. Why? Because these are our limited sciences. These are small. History that we study is very different from what the Quran tells us about history. Psychology that we study is very different from what the Quran could benefit us when we look at it with psychology eyes. So in other words, the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is a bayan or illustration of the Quran, are at the foundation of knowledge, but not in the disciplinary way, not in a way in which we are looking into economic equations in the Quran, or we say, where are the architectural designs in the Quran, or where are the linguistic rules or grammar. The Quran doesn't have that, but the Quran guides language studies and guides psychological studies and guides historical studies. Why? Because it comes from Al-Hakim Al-Khabir, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes from the all-wise and the all-expert, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when he talks in the Quran, he will give us a fundamental, the definition of the human. Every one of these sciences deal with the human. The definition of our environment, al-mubawwa, the Quran calls it. In Arabic, we call it al-bi'a, but it is mubawwa. That mubawwa that the Quran is talking about is mubawwa sidq and mubawwa rida, and there are certain aspects that we do not describe the environment like that when we do environmental studies. And therefore, what we need the maqasid for is to define the objectives, the higher objectives, upon which we are able to build new knowledge, to restructure the disciplines that we have. We have in an Islamic university setting a new agenda. We have to set the agenda of restructuring economics, not in the good old capitalist way, but to see what ideas that capitalism could benefit us. And al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, wisdom is the lost property of the believer, so that perhaps we can borrow some of the ideas, we can build on what humanity has developed. But Islamic economics is not capitalist economics, and Islamic psychology is not Darwinian or Maslowian, and Islamic architecture is not French modernism, and Islamic politics is not based on Westphalia and Machiavelli and Hobbes, and Islamic philosophy is not Aristotelian or all the schools of the Greek or the post-Greek or 17th century and so forth. Why? Because we have different fundamentals. We have a different philosophy. The maqasid of the Sharia in this sense, if we look at the teleological side of Islam, if you look at the purposes and the higher objectives of Islam, then we can start to imagine a different basis of knowledge, a basis that would automatically take us from disciplinary studies to multidisciplinarity, and from multidisciplinarity to transdisciplinarity. And I believe in ISTAC, this is a major part of what we do. I was consulted by a number of scholars over there, whether my colleagues, the professors in the research they do, or our students there. And none of them is really confined to one discipline. None of them told me that, no, this is just economics. I'm not going to bring any other aspect. But they, by definition, because they are taking an Islamic approach, by definition, they find themselves multidisciplinary, and they find themselves even transdisciplinary, looking at disciplines from above and not being confined to the fundamental theories of disciplines, which are mostly based on philosophers who came from a very different approach from the Tauhidi approach. The Tauhidi approach is an Imani approach, is an approach that looks at the universe with the eyes of a believer. And therefore, the believer is not going to define the human as Freud or Maslow defined the human. The believer is not going to define the society as Durkheim defined the society, or Hobbes or Hegel. It doesn't mean that they don't have good ideas. They do. But it means that we borrow from them only what is compatible with our objectives, our maqasid, our higher objectives. The object, obviously, of Tawheed is the highest one. And then under that, you have Al-Imran, civilization. You have At-Taqwa, or heedfulness, awareness. You have the maqsad of Islah, or rectification, or reform. You have a maqsad of istikhlaf, or being, I don't like the vicegerents, but basically succession of humanity to civilization on earth, you have these kinds of maqasid that are under Tawheed that are going to guide us to restructure knowledge. So the essence of what I would like to say in the time allowed is that the projects for the renewal of Islam are not contradictory, and I do view the Maqasid project that I personally am very busy with and write on, etc., as a contributor to a Tajdeed project that is based on the Tauhidic Epistemology. And this contribution is actually in shifting the paradigm to a purpose-based, objective-based paradigm ghai, or purpose-based, objective-based, ends-based, telos-based, if you want to speak the Greek language, so that the epistemology is actually Quranic. Al-Masdar al-Ma'rifi, to speak Arabic, al-Ma'rifa would be from the Quran, the Book of Allah, the concepts, the objectives, the parties, the different aspects of values, etc., so that we can rebuild our knowledge and so that we can contribute to a better world. Finally, I would like to say that this renewal from the Islamic point of view is much needed in today's time, given the massacres that are happening, given the failure of international systems, not just the political systems. The economic systems are failing us. The media systems are failing us and failing the truth and failing humanity. And what's happening in Palestine is a very obvious example of the failure of these hegemonic systems. And the Islamic projects for renewal are all very important for humanity to see a different kind of light for its life, for humanity to look at life in a more humane way. That is what Islam would contribute, let alone in a Tawhidi way that knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and works for pleasing Him subhanahu wa ta'ala with everything that is good. Jazakumullah khair. It's the time allowed to me. And again, I look forward to meeting everybody back in Kuala Lumpur. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Jasser Auda, for the excellent deliberation just now. Actually, this program is organized accidentally together with the Festival of Ideas. Right now, it's actually ongoing in Putrajaya. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate and thanks Professor Ahmad Khalid for the championing this program actually that we have here this afternoon. And actually, during Festival of Ideas yesterday, Prof. Murad actually was there, was speaking about ideas as well. So right now, let us listen to, yes, your deliberation, please, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I was at the Festival of Ideas yesterday morning, and I spoke at the first session forum titled History of Ideas. And I mentioned ISTAC as one of the early institutions established in Malaysia based on to produce knowledge within the domain of the history of ideas. When we talk about history of ideas, we talk about the grand movements, connectivities. We talk about the processes of history. We talk about concepts, sometimes called conceptual history, sometimes it's called, and mainly it's called intellectual history. So ISTAC is one of those institutions that thrives, that cultivates, people say transdisciplinary, but it's more than that. It's post-disciplinary knowledge systems. Apart from ISTAC, we have CASIS, and we have, at one time, Institute of Occidental Studies at UKM, formed in 2003, but they have faded because they have not been able to manage the production of knowledge. So this is a problem of epistemology. And what we are doing now is to address and to discuss and to understand the epistemological problems of the world. Although we are focusing on Tauhidic epistemology, but it is founded on a larger context, both modern as well as before the modern period. My presentation briefly would have three components. One, some remarks about why we're doing this. Second, I would like to be faithful to what was discussed by Professor Osman and a few other scholars. I think when Prof. Osman announced the theme of Tauhidic epistemology, many perhaps were taken aback, and they were comment saying that this is another label, this is another process. Do we need to have another initiative? But we feel to look at the corpus that Prof. Osman has produced over the last 40 years. And third, some suggestions. Now, why we are embarking on this is due to the response of the modern world. And I would like to go straight to the three dimensions of secularization, which was written and encapsulated by Professor Naqib Alatas. I think such discussions, we have to go through the literature so that we actually understand the intricacies of the project. And this is part of the initiative over the last 50 years in producing a different knowledge system, alternative knowledge systems to secularized knowledge, to secular knowledge, to colonial knowledge. So we have, for example, over the last 50 years or 60 years, different knowledge systems that have been called variably Islamization of knowledge, de-Westernization of knowledge, pedagogy of the oppressed, critical theory, and now we have Tauhidic epistemology. If you look at these processes, we find that they are not distinct from one another. They reinforce and renew the process. And if you remember, in the 80s, Malaysia was very active at the time the university was just established in discussing about Islamization of the disciplines. There are conferences on Islamization of psychology, sociology, communication. I was involved in the convening a conference on the Islamization of communication in 1989. At the time, UIA also was involved but there are flaws in looking at Islamization within disciplines, because the assumption is that these disciplines fall from heaven. These disciplines are permanent in nature, in their stature and their boundaries. We cannot see them as flexible. We cannot see them as having an abeyance. We cannot see them as fluid. So again, there are criticisms as to this approach. And also, I have not seen, perhaps ISTAC can do, an approach looking at the corpus of social science, because when we talk about social science, we're talking about an evolutionist epistemology, which Prof. Osman did mention in his speech a few weeks back. This was a response to the evolutionist epistemology that we have inherited over the last, perhaps we look at the emergence of the social science disciplines over the last 300 years. We have inherited lock, stock, and barrel. We have not changed. We have not restructured, and we cannot place religion. We cannot place Islam in the corpus of social science. So again, this is where one of the defects of Islam. We cannot see Islam as a category. If you want to talk about Islam, we go to the Islamic Studies department, and the Ummah is not a category accepted in the social scientific discourse. it is society. So again, these things must be taken into account. But I'll go back to the problem that we are facing, and we have to understand this the nature of this problem of the dimensions of secularization. I mentioned three. Always, in my lectures, there are three problems: the disenchantment of nature, the desacralization of politics, and the deconstruction of values. This has been summed up by Rakib Alatas in 1978. This is the original 1978 edition. I read it when I was a student. It's still in good condition. Let me go through. By the disenchantment of nature, a term and concept borrowed from the German sociologist Max Weber. This is another culprit in sociology, but we have to reread Max Weber. Max Weber, when he wrote many of his works, for example, the Protestantism and the Spirit of Capitalism, he wrote it as a priest. He did not write it as a sociologist or as an economist. So again, we fail to reread that. Anyway, what he means is that the freeing of nature from its religious overtones, the freeing of nature from its religious overtones. And this involves the dispelling of animistic spirits and gods and magic from the natural world, separating it from God and distinguishing man from it, so that man may no longer regard nature as a divine entity. Man may not regard nature as a divine entity, which thus allows him to act freely upon nature, to make use of it according to his needs and plans, and hence create historical change and development. Again, this is another problematic word, development. By the secularization of politics, they mean the abolition of sacral legitimation of political power and authority, which is the prerequisite of political change, and hence also social change, allowing for the emergence of the historical process. And here we can see how politics has brought itself into, and how we have consumed that politics. By the deconsecration of values, the rendering transient and relative all cultural creations and every value system, which for them includes religion and worldviews. Meaning the throwing away or discarding of religion and worldviews, having ultimate and final significance, so that in this way, history, the future, is open to change, and man is free to create the change and immerse himself in the evolutionary process. So these three contexts, which are derived from the crisis in humanity, and this crisis in humanity has been voiced out by many figures, including scholars, including poets like T.S. Eliot, myself and Dr. Ain rendered The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's poem, and George Santayana. These people are actually bemoaning the death of humanism in the context of Western society, and the death of humanity. I'm using humanism and humanity. They are bemoaning that man has been entrenched from the umbilical cord. I use the word umbilical cord with regard to how we are cut off from that, and we are being astray. So when you talk about Tauhidic epistemology, it is returning or devolving. It's a process of devolution. We have evolved, so we are devolving into the center. Because when we talk about the university, early modern universities, early European universities are based on the earlier Islamic universities. But over time, the universities, the modern university, have lost their center. They have evolved into ways that they've lost their path. And this is where, when you talk about Tauhidic epistemology, we're talking about in the context of the larger society and how it is reflected by the university that we aspire. Now, in the 70s, we see a decade of turbulence and a decade of crisis, and a decade where many things emerge. One of which are the two conferences in Mecca on science and technology and education. We have the oil embargo. If you are old enough to remember, 1973. You have the Iranian Revolution, 1978. These are culminations and these are responses to what we're doing now. One of which is it induced in the 70s approaches toward, as I've said, Islamization, de-Westernization, and what Prof. Osman is talking about. Prof. Osman has been talking about Islamization of knowledge. In fact, if we go to the literature, the word Tauhidic Epistemology has been mentioned by Prof. Osman decades ago. From his Al-Farabi book, from his book on the classification of knowledge, and his various papers written about 10 to 12 years ago, he has asserted the need to look into, to institute an epistemology based on Tawhid and divinity. I would like to go through one of his papers and to exactly and precisely trying to understand what he means by Tauhidic epistemology, because in these papers, he linked Tauhidic epistemology with the identity of the Ummah. Identity of the Ummah and identity of the university. But again, as I've said, we have been talking about the Ummah, but the Ummah never factored in modern knowledge systems. The Ummah has never been factored into international relations. The Ummah has never been factored into geopolitical relations. The Ummah has never been factored into the United Nations in the knowledge production systems. Only in the OIC, which was established in the 70s. So again, and the Ummah matters to us, but it does not matter to the rest of the world. So how do we factor in the Ummah? So again, when he talks about that, he links to identity, and the identity of Muslims is the Ummah. And the Muslim Ummatic identity and early on, some say that Islam is the civilization of the book. The religion is thus structurally divided into the dimensions of beliefs and practices, articles of faith, and pillars of Islam, respectively, to cater to men's needs arising from his twofold division into thinking and willing components explained earlier. In principle, Islam's knowledge community is born out of the association of individuals who accept these knowledge-based beliefs and practices. Islam communalizes these beliefs and practices so that they serve as the foundations of a knowledge-driven community that will be free of conflicts between individual and collective interests. And here, Prof. Osman mentioned the main content of Islamic epistemology is derived from the application of the domains of the branches of knowledge. So we will fail in understanding it if we do not link it to the branches of knowledge. It has to be linked to what there is in the university. The raison d'etre for the university are knowledge systems, the production of knowledge, the divisions of knowledge, the unity of knowledge, and the organization of knowledge. I'll come back to this problem of how we have divided, subdivided, we have fragmented knowledge. The three derivative epistemological principles, as mentioned by Prof. Osman. Number one is This is what Prof. Osman says in his paper published in 2012. There are a number of papers published in 2012 in the context of Islamic renewal and civilization. One, the idea of the unity of knowledge is derived from the divine name, Al-Alim, the omniscient. All forms and branches of knowledge are harmoniously interrelated by virtue of the fact that all human knowledge ultimately comes from God, which is not the case of the rest of the universities. Although men may acquire it through various ways and means, there could not be any conflict between any two branches or bodies of knowledge. Since this idea is fundamental to Tauhidic epistemology, it was practically realized as part of a living knowledge culture. Consequently, Islamic society was spared such epistemological conflicts as between the natural sciences and the social sciences or the humanities, as happened in the modern West. It started essentially 500 years ago. Prof. Osman refers to C.P. Snow. We take history of science, history and philosophy of science. We'll be familiar with this guy, C.P. Snow. In the 50s, he made reference to the West conflict of two cultures, the two cultures thesis, the culture of science and the culture of the humanities. C.P. Snow wrote an open letter. Apparently, that letter expressed concern with what's happening in Britain and Europe over this division of knowledge between the arts and sciences. But not written in the letter is Snow's concern of the state of society in Britain. He fears that the arts would dominate the sciences in Britain. So he was concerned about how the British would not be competitive with regard to the other nations in Europe. So these two cultures bears a close relationship with epistemological conflicts. And this happened in the modern period. This happened over so many revolutions, so many epochs in Western Europe. The scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, industrial revolution, and so on. You find these phases of divisions. Closely related to the idea of the unity of knowledge is the idea of the order and harmony in the domain of knowledge. Order and harmony. When the human mind is faced with having to organize knowledge according to some system in the midst of seeming disarray, disorganization and confusion in the knowledge field, then the need for the idea of order and harmony is apparent. It presupposes categorizations of knowledge into well-defined types and norms. It is natural for the human mind to love seeing order and harmony in the domain of knowledge, since it has been structured to fulfill its intellectual, rational, logical, and mental needs in an orderly fashion. The human mind hates images of disorganized knowledge. It was with the view of realizing order and harmony in the field of knowledge and thought, and of catering to men's natural, intellectual, and rational needs, that the classical Muslims developed a knowledge culture in which definitions, classifications, and order rigor feature prominently. And the third idea behind this is the hierarchy of knowledge. Okay? Unity of knowledge, order of knowledge, and hierarchy of knowledge. The central teaching of Tauhidic epistemology may be viewed as a key component of the idea of order and harmony, since it is meant to establish order and justice, adab, in human knowledge. The various forms and branches of knowledge need to be hierarchically ordered in accordance with their respective epistemological values, which differ from each other. So these are the major features of or major ideas behind Tauhidic epistemology. Subsequently, in at least two of his articles, Prof. Osman made some conclusions and suggestions, which I'll read out and complement this. So he suggested the following. Centers of Islamic studies that we're doing in the research need to intensify research on issues of ummatic identity, given its importance to the health and dignity of the ummah. There should be more teaching and research programs on epistemology from the Islamic perspective on the Muslim world that will result in much needed publications on the subject. Leadership, followership issues, and the issue of the unity of the ulama and umara need to be further articulated for the benefit of the general public. Islam's knowledge and thinking culture needs to be better understood and cultivated by the Muslims with a view of strengthening the ummatic identity. In another paper published in the same year, and this paper is called The Identity Crisis of the Contemporary Muslim Ummah, the loss of Tauhidic Epistemology as its root cause. And this is where I think Prof. Osman emphasized in the last part of his lecture the response toward evolutionist epistemology. And here he concluded under the title, The Need for Tajdeed in Epistemology. One, more studies need to be done in the epistemological roots of the Ummah's knowledge crisis in modern times and the implications of this crisis for the Ummah's identity. Tauhidic epistemology needs to be better known to the present generation of Muslim scholars because of the important role that it can play in overcoming the Ummah's knowledge crisis and contributing to the development of a healthy knowledge culture. Existing research centers and groups dedicated to the rediscovery and recovery of classical Islamic ideas of perennial values that have been lost or forgotten need to be further strengthened and material moral support. The recovered precious epistemological ideas need to be reformulated and intellectually repackaged in contemporary language so that they could be easily understood, digested, and internalized by the present generation of Muslims. And lastly, these repackaged ideas need to be given a proper place in the present treasury of Muslim thought by being translated into traditional programs in various areas of knowledge and at various levels of learning. Here I would like to further suggest, which I've been throwing out this idea. One is a university based on the Tauhidic epistemology should have as few kuliah as possible. Because this kuliah, the number of kuliahs that universities have would only manifest the fragmentation of knowledge, would only reinforce the disciplinary boundaries. And where is the unity? Would only create territoriality among professors. Professors would say that they own this knowledge. They say that sociology comes from heaven. Chemistry comes from heaven. I mean, we're talking about the study. We're not talking about the subject matter. We're talking about the study and the discipline. All these disciplines that we learn in our university emerged only in the 17th century. They have not been around over thousands of years. They only emerged in the modern period as an academic discipline in the universities. You know, the political science that we study, although Plato, Aristotle, and studied politics, but the study and the academic subject of political science only emerged in the 18th century. So here we're talking about disciplines that we know are humanly constructed. They are socially constructed. They can collapse anytime. And we in this university are loyal to it. If somebody wants to collapse our kuliah or faculty, we say, no, this is our faculty. That's one. So in UIA, in this university, from the number of kuliahs that we have, we should reduce it to 2 or 3. Second, we have 50 journals, which is a waste of money. And all these 50 journals represent 50 mazhab. And we're talking about unity of knowledge and we're talking about integration of knowledge. So what I would propose, one, is, and this should be done in Malaysia. We have not done it before. I've been making noise to a few people over the last decades to restructure and revamp the social science curriculum. I know that we're talking about the sciences, but I'm looking into the social science curriculum first. Restructure and revamp the social science curriculum. Because the social science curriculum is born out of a crisis-ridden, crisis-minded Europe, where Europe has a crisis between their god and gods, between their kings and between their padres. And their crisis is unique to them, not to us. But as a result of this crisis, 16th, 17th century, they created the social science as disciplines was created. It began with sociology. In the 17th century, sociology was called social physics because they modeled along the study of science, the study of the physical and biological sciences. So it was called social physics, Auguste Comte and Saint-Simon and so on. And later anthropology. So all this happened between the 1700 and the late 1800s. Between 1700 and late 1800s, Western Europe, as a result of this crisis, developed 5 major disciplines in what we call the social sciences. The best way to assess it is to rely on the classification by the Chicago School. Okay? The Chicago School is, UC Chicago. They develop many of the thoughts and concepts that we practice now in terms of integration, social change, conflict. They were an amalgamation of the migration, the Jewish migration from Europe to America, because America became a factory to be resolved. So the Chicago School produced the 5 major disciplines in the larger discipline of the social sciences. I mean, it's structured as such. We have sociology, anthropology, economics, political science, and psychology. So these are the 5 basic social science disciplines that has been imported into Muslim countries and into Malaysia since the early 70s. And since then, well, how many years? 50 years? Nothing has changed. Because when we look at the social science corpus, it is much a secular corpus. It doesn't recognize religion. It does not recognize the Ummah. It does not recognize divinity. Why is it so? It is because along the way, in the 17th century, you have the scientific revolution. Many things happened in the scientific revolution. During the scientific revolution, facts were created. When facts were created, what was defactualized? Can you tell me? God, the angels, and the prophets. They were defactualized from the discourse. Any production of knowledge during that time, based on what they call natural philosophy, would remove this domain, would remove God, the prophets, and the angels. So they were defactualized. Hence, that shaped and colored the secular nature of modern social science. And when we do our thesis and when we study, we do not factor in that element in our research methodology or even in our thesis. I remember supervising some, I encountered some students, PhD students, when they quoted the Quran, that quotation was asked to be expunged from the thesis because of the structure of social science. So again, this is a very important, pertinent way of how we have to debunk. We're not debunking social science, no, but we have to restructure social science. We have to study knowledge-bearing systems as fluid, accommodating, and a construction of men, a construction of modern men. So I guess I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are about to, Prof, just now actually I think the last 2 points that you mentioned is the most powerful one. That is the knowledge and territoriality. I think this is very wonderful idea. We're going to continue the discussion after this. For those people who just joined, ladies and gentlemen, our discussion is Tauhidic Epistemology and the 21st Century Islamic University Challenges and Implication under the ISTAC-IIUM series on the future of integration of human knowledge and civilizational development. Let us continue our discussion by inviting Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Nasrin bin Muhammad Nasir. You're welcome. You can see it.
This one. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everybody who is here. I was really surprised when I saw my name on the poster. Dr. Ain has graciously invited me. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Ain, as well as Prof. Abdul Aziz for agreeing to invite me. This is really a challenging discourse, which they've asked me to discuss, which actually is the idea from Prof. Osman. So by right, the idea of Prof. Osman should really be given by Prof. Osman himself. The topic that is given to me, theoretical foundations of Tauhidic Epistemology, bridging tradition and modernity. Wow, it's a very, very big topic. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't think I can. It's just gave me like 2 weeks ago. So I think I'll require a sabbatical for 6 months. Prof, if you can allow. Then I'll come back in a short article, 40 pages. Whatever it is, I have instead prepared to talk about mainly epistemology because in my last place of work at UKM, they've asked me to focus on epistemology at UKM, but the epistemology that I focused on was mainly philosophical. So because when you talk about epistemology, you cannot run away from philosophy, and philosophy is not easy. It's very difficult. So I'm not going to make it easy. It's difficult, it should stay difficult. If you understand it, very good. If you don't, I can suggest you a few books you can read at the library if you want. But I would just like to respond to, first of all, the idea that this Islamization of knowledge that was given by Professor Jasser Auda just now. The talk was excellent by Professor Jasser Auda. There's one part there where he talked about the implication of Islamization of knowledge, which is really, really true, which unfortunately has not been done. And that is, I think, the idea that it has to produce new knowledge. The thing is, when you integrate or you Islamize a kind of knowledge, you want to include new aspects to it, the knowledge that is there is not going to be what it was before. It's going to be something new. When it is something new, not a lot of people can accept that because it's basically asking them to ask the question of their field of knowledge. And it's really questioning them to hold on to something that is new. Say, for example, someone who's done psychology for many, many years, and psychology, I don't want to talk about east, west, north, south, whatever. But psychology, you talk about people from Carl Jung, Freud, all these ideas that they come with proof and evidences which they have received from their interviews with people. Thus making the knowledge quite strong and has supports. Now, when you want to Islamize that, for example, from the Atasian sense, you bring in the idea of what is the concept of man and the human soul. Yes, follow what Al-Atas has said in his book, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7. You're going to get a different kind of idea of what psychology is, isn't it? You're not going to get the same old psychology. You cannot return back to Freud, who focused mainly on the physical and the libido and, you know, your relations with your mother, you know, which is not mentioned, you know, in Islamic, conception of the soul. Where in the conception of the soul, it creates the idea that the soul has certain ideas that was implemented in it, as God says in the Quran, and therefore that knowledge that we have in regards to the world and reality is built up, is building our perception of reality as we see it. So our soul is not a blank slate in a sense, you know, unlike what modern psychology would say, a carte blanche or whatever. So you are producing new knowledge. But when you're producing new knowledge, are we going to teach that in class where it's going to go against a whole tradition of psychology that was before, a whole journals, 50 journals, like Prof. Murad said just now? Are we going to go and do this? Who is going to be our group of people? Who is going to be our peers? Who's going to talk like that? Then we're going to look like maybe the one sore thumb in the room, you know, the only person in the room who's talking from that angle. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to do integration or Islamization of knowledge at the level of, you know, maybe, you know, epistemology. But even then, when you're doing at the level of epistemology, the fruits of that epistemology will come out in the aspect of practicality. So you have to change. So we have done this for 50 years, Islamization of knowledge, integration of knowledge. I am fed up with it, you know, because we have not produced any new knowledge in regards to that. You know, I teach the subject at master's level. Maybe this is why they asked me to come and give you a lecture on this. But at the master's level, I teach this subject, and you look at the sayings and the statements of people like Professor Al-Atas and Professor Ismail Faruqi. You see, what we are saying today is what they have already mentioned before. You know, what they've mentioned already before in their works. If you go, you know, as we do in our class, we go through each of the writings and we look at what they write, you know, instead of, you know, I think what he said was this. No. We show you how, you know, Prof. Atas had mentioned and Prof. Faruqi had mentioned, you know, in regards to knowledge, in regards to epistemology, etc. And we find that they've mentioned this a long time ago, but nobody is picking up the baton and doing it. Because nobody wants to produce a new psychology or a new field of knowledge which is different from others, right? Which is going to be different, which is going to be probably, you know, a new type of knowledge which is not going to be recognized and thus not allowing you to become an expert in the field. You know, so, and then there's the question of which aspects of that, you know, because I mentioned just now Atas, because Atas mentioned these issues. What about other scholars? Other scholars have also written about the conception of the soul, which is different probably from Atas. If some would say Atas's view is mainly spiritual, but others had mentioned it from a very more probably rooted in the Quran and the Hadith. You would say that, right? So, who do you follow at the end? This is also another question. I think why the project has not taken off is because of this. We have not addressed the different pluralism that is within Islamic studies itself, Islamic thought itself, with different people coming with different schools. In a school of epistemology, you have at least 4 different schools in Islam. You have how the Sufi would view epistemology. You have the Mutakallimun, how they would view epistemology. You have the philosophers, how they would view epistemology. And of course, you would have the people who follow the hadith, how they would view epistemology. Which one is the one? That's a question, isn't it? That's a question. Normally, we Muslims, because we respect authority, so we would let the authority to decide. as Prof. Atas would say, the authority should be the individuals who have knowledge. Those are the individuals who have to decide, the ulil albab, those who mentioned in the Quran. Yes, the ahli zikr, was'alu ahli zikr. Yes, ask of them. Yes, but how do we solve this? Who are these individuals? I've asked Prof. 1 this question, 2005. Yeah? I asked him this question. Not 2005, sorry, 2012. And I got my FRGS from the government to do research on this. I asked him the question, who are these knowledgeable people that we have to ask? Is it you, Prof. 1? Yes. His answer was, people who have knowledge would know. Yes, thank you very much. Okay. So I asked, therefore I don't have knowledge. So who should ask this question then? Yes. Who should it be? Yes, because you have, when you look at Islamic civilization, you have these 4 different groups of people, 5 different interpretational issues in Islam. It's a big issue. That's why the West, when they deal with this, they label us. Yeah, they label us. They look at us and say, oh, this group, oh, they follow more the philosophical side, or that group more follow the Sufi side, that group follow more the textual side or the literal side, as they say. That's how they label all the, and the labeling game continues. We use it too, labeling game, right? So who decides for us, right? That's why Prof. Atas mentioned in secularization, he mentioned about, how it is important, how we have lost adab because we have appointed false leaders. We have appointed false leaders because we are confused. Yes, and Prof. Atas, if you listen to him, 2000, 2003, 2004, 2005, he mentioned this a lot. Yes, people are confused. Yes, people are confused. Because who do we decide? Yeah, who do we decide to be? And we all know those who decide are those who have power and authority. Yes, but this is the issue in Islam, which should be basically solved by which discussion is the best, or which discussion is that we should take. I'm sorry, I'm taking this line because I come from outside of Islamic studies. I was not educated from small in Islamic studies. I was an engineer before this. And I wanted to know the answers to these questions because I was looking at the different schools that were there. You have the Sunni and the Shia school. The Shia divided so many different schools because of the cultish nature of their aqidah. And you have the Sunnis, and you have the 4 mazhabs, and you have the different mutakallim groups, and so on and so forth, right? So that's why when I study Islam, I look at these different schools. Unlike those who come from the madrasa system, you're already set in your field, you're already set. So we follow Ash'ariyah, Maturidiyah, so, and this is becoming a big issue now, right, in Malaysia. But we're not talking about Malaysia here, we're talking about a bigger issue of Tauhidic epistemology. Now, when you look at epistemology from an Islamic point of view, what does epistemology talk about? So most of the time, people make a difference, and because it's the title of the talk, tradition and modernity. People make a difference between tradition and modernity, as if everybody who is modern follow the modern epistemology, but not all. Not all people who follow epistemology follow the modern epistemology. As you know, in the West, there is also this debate. Professor Jasser Auda, he's in Canada. He would know better of this debate about the debate in the teaching of science to school students, whether they use the evolutionary approach or the creationist approach, right? You have these issues. So not everybody in the modern world actually believe in modern epistemology, and not everybody in the Muslim world actually believe the epistemology as given by Muslim philosophers. But whatever be the case, we have one single unity between us, and that single unity between us is the Quran and the Hadith. Is the Quran and the Hadith. These are the single primary principle of our discussion in Islam, right? That we are united in this. Therefore, we can say that whatever that we find in the Quran and the Hadith, we can say for sure that the conception of man, the conception of society, the conception of the next world, the conception of, you know, the world, that there's a reality that is divided to the ghaib and the alamul shahada, you know, what you can see is not in modern Western curriculum or even in the other subjects that you study. Okay, so you have that discussion. So when you talk about Islamic epistemology, when you talk about modernity, most of it comes from Immanuel Kant in modernity due to the Enlightenment period that we have in Europe and in the West in general. The Enlightenment period, the aim of the Enlightenment was to make everything based upon reason and rationality. That was the aim of the Enlightenment period. But in 1996, 1998, when I was in the UK, the philosophers were already discussing about the failure of the Enlightenment project. The failure of the Enlightenment project, meaning that the Enlightenment did not manage to make all Western people to believe in reason and rationality, because there are still people in the West who believe in religion and something that we call metaphysics, right? Metaphysics. But so following Kant, the conception of knowledge is limited to the physical and the empirical type only. However, in Islamic epistemology, knowledge is equally valid for the physical, empirical types, as well as the non-physical and metaphysical type. So to Kant, we cannot know knowledge of things as they are, because they are in the realm of what he called as the noumenon. And he divided that this realm is the realm of the phenomena or the phenomenon. And none touches the noumenon except for God. Therefore, whatever that we know is only here. And whatever that we know here is still based upon perceptions, interpretations. So that's why Western philosophy, they went from perception into interpretation. So they're discussing interpretation when they discuss towards the building of the next thing that happened in Western civilization, the reformation of the church, right? Reformation of the church. That is the interpretation of the text, interpretation of the Bible, hermeneutics, in other words. How do you actually interpret? This discussion about interpretation is very, very important also in Islam, right? Which we studied during our masters, but is very little studied here, right? Very little studied here, especially when you use that word hermeneutics. Everybody is so scared about that word. It's like trying to Christianize Islamic studies, whereas it's actually talking about interpretation of text. That's what it is. It's very, very simple. Interpretation of text. Do you base the text on hadith, or you base the text on the literal meaning of the words, etc.? Al-Faruqi, in his writing on Tauhid, in that collection of writings called Tauhid, and also in that collection of writings called Islamization of Knowledge, yes, that one. He mentioned that what is important when you are studying Islam is Arabic syntax and, you know, Arabic grammar when you want to study Islam, when you want to study Quran. Professor Atas, he includes a third dimension, which he called the lexicographers, meaning the Arabic dictionaries. Okay, so these are interpretational issues. So Al-Atas, he took that issue of interpretation based upon the lexicographers and created his own semantic field of certain words. That is akin similar to what Izutsu had taught him when he was doing his masters at McGill, right? McGill. But there are differences. Of course, there are differences because Atas is a Muslim, Izutsu is not, right? So you find issues of interpretation still is within the thinking of Muslim thinkers, which unfortunately is not being taken apart by any others after them, right? So for Faruqi was important, and for Al-Atas also was important. Okay, so when you're talking about interpretation, so like in the West, you have this discussion about objectivity and subjectivity, right? Objectivity and subjectivity. What is objective and what is subjective? So you're based upon the idea that what is objective is universally known, right, by everybody, or is called common sense. But what is common sense in a place is not common sense to another place, in another environment. So that commonality is not there, it doesn't exist. So there is no such thing as objectivity if you follow the positivist way of defining things. In the 19th century, people, and then the earlier 20th century by people like A.J. Ayer wrote in his small book, very nice book, he's a good writer. He wrote and he talked about this idea of subjectivity and objectivity, and where he basically said whatever that cannot be written and cannot be verified is considered to be nonsense, right? So basically, you know, following, just supporting what Prof. Murad said just now, right, in social science, yeah. So it cannot be accepted. It can considered to be as nonsense. I have only 2 minutes left. Yes, and I have only reached number 6 in my slides, which I have 39. And there's only part 1, so maybe next week you can come for part 2. I'm just joking. No, I'm not doing this again. This is a very hot seat, yes. Okay, so but later on, Karl Popper, who came in the 20th century, he changed the thing on its head and said that no, objectivity and subjectivity should be based upon argumentations, which is similar to how we Muslims believe. In regards to in idea of hermeneutics and interpretational of certain verses of the Quran, or the meaning of hadith, etc. Karl Popper, he said that objectivity should be based upon the transparency of an argumentation, meaning the argumentation has to be understood and be seen to be transparent even by those who are not within a particular field. Right, a particular field. Of course, you know, this Karl Popper was probably the only guy who talked about this during his time. And then the idea of subjective would mean that an argument that is badly constructed or whatever, which cannot be seen as, doesn't lead to transparency, etc. I think if we, as Muslims, when we talk about Tauhidic Epistemology, and towards the end now, etc., we need to be taking it and connect it to the ideas of justice and also transparency, as I think Prof. Osman did in that slide of his. I think there was that 11 slides that he gave, you know, the one that you forwarded to me, is considered to be like, you know, a very grand summary of the, you know, of many pages of discussions and books which can be written on that, right? Where he mentioned one of the components of Tauhidic epistemology is the idea of justice, and I would include here as transparency as well. That would justify our argumentation and justify our interpretation, justify our reading of things, so that the field is open for people to criticize, people to discuss. For transparency is important for us to understand. Most importantly is that we are all the same, and we make mistakes and we can be corrected. Innamal mu'minuna ikhwah, you know, because all Muslims are brothers, and ad-din nasiha. The deen or religion is advice. I think that's it for now. I know I've not done any justice at all to the title, but I hope a bit for the discussion that follows. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Nasrin, for your deliberation. It is equally insightful, definitely. Now let us move to Dr. Ain. You're welcome, Dr. Ain. Meanwhile, for those people who has a question, please be ready, because in the Zoom here, we have a lot of questions that we are going to tackle. If you are here having a question, please be prepared, and we will come back to you after the last presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So today I'll be talking about innovative approaches to knowledge integration, the role of technology in advancing Tauhidic Epistemology. And as usual, I will start with questions. Yeah, there are several questions that arise from my topic. So first is, what is the meaning of knowledge integration itself? Number two is that how it will happen, knowledge integration, what it is, how it will happen, and how can it be applied in the context of today's world. So three things. All right, let us start with some points of our discussion. Tauhidic Epistemology. Do you understand what is Tauhidic Epistemology? So Tauhidic Epistemology is the belief in the oneness and absolute sovereignty of Allah. Oneness and absolute sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this belief is not merely theological, but it serves as a foundational worldview that shapes, number one, how knowledge is acquired, number two, how knowledge is understood, and number three, how knowledge is applied in every aspect. And it frames knowledge as holistic, as serving the dual purpose of man, and first understanding the creator, and number two, fulfilling our role as Khalifa. Okay, so that is some points of our discussions. Thus, when speaking about knowledge in whole and disciplines in specific, they are interconnected, because we're speaking about what? We're speaking about oneness of Allah and absolute sovereignty, and then we come back to what? How knowledge is acquired, understood. So it must be interconnected, not disconnected. Why? Because of that belief, of that framework you applied. What is that? Tawheed. And Tawheed is oneness of Allah, absolute sovereignty of Allah, and understanding that He is the creator and you are the servant of the creator, and that everything comes from Him, even you yourself. Okay, now let's come back to knowledge integration. So what is knowledge integration in this aspect? In the lens of Tauhidic epistemology, in this context, epistemology means it is equal to knowledge integration. And what is Tawheed? Is that oneness and absolute sovereignty of Allah. So if Tauhidic epistemology is knowledge integration, thus it refers to the theory of knowledge and how we acquire, how we validate, and how we apply knowledge. In Tauhidic epistemology, it specifically means, number one, understanding knowledge as originating from Allah. Number two, integrating revelation, wahyu, and reason, aql. Number three, applying it holistically to what? To fulfill divine purpose. Like what? Like what Professor Jasser has mentioned, maqasid, for justice, for accountability, and for stewardship. So in this framework, for aligning all knowledge, all this knowledge that we have with the oneness of Allah, with Tawheed, is about what? From where we come from, or from where this knowledge comes from, to where it goes. From Allah to Allah. The question is in between. How? Knowledge integration. And this, it becomes what? In between this is human reasoning. And we must believe that human reasoning is a gift from Allah. But then a question arises, what? Will. Correct? Human reasoning is a gift from Allah, but in Tauhidic epistemology, will determines your the very you and the objectives. So these objectives need to be aligned with the oneness of Allah. It needs to go to that objective of oneness of Allah. You get it? Integrating between wahi and aql. That aql must be supported by divine revelation so that it creates to one path. So from where? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How? It creates this oneness of you willing, willing that will that you choose between the right or wrong, between the sweet or bitter, between the black or white. You choose with the revelation, with the guidance of divine revelation, determines the very you, determines that the knowledge goes and is in the right path, is not astray. Okay? All right. So, okay, now how do we apply it? How do we apply it in the contemporary world? What is the meaning of oneness in today's world? And what do you mean by integrating something that is above the sky with something on earth? So I will create a metaphor. I will bring you to think about a metaphor and imagine embarking on a journey through a vast, intricate garden. So this garden symbolizes the realm of knowledge. You can even think about this ISTAC, all right, or Alhambra, for instance, all right? And then the garden symbolizes the realm of knowledge where there's path, okay? In each path representing different disciplines and insight. And at the center stands a radiant fountain embodying the divine source from which all understanding flows. Number one, the principle of Tauhidic epistemology is the unity of source of that fountain. It is called Tauhid al-Ma'rifah. And the fountain at the garden's heart signifies that all knowledge originates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, integrating both revelation, wahy, and human aql, human reasoning. And just as the fountain nourishes every part of the garden, divine wisdom permeates all areas of understanding. Number two, the principle is integration of knowledge. That is takamul al-ma'rifah. And as you explore, you notice that the garden has no barriers separating its sections, all right? It seems like it has barriers, but it is actually one because of this flow that in the center of that fountain, all right? And as you explore, you notice that the garden has no barriers separating its sections, and the medicinal herbs grows along the ornamental flowers. And what does it mean? Illustrating that religious and worldly knowledge coexist harmoniously, enriching both spiritual and material aspects of life. Okay, so it is not something that is dismantled. It is disconnected. Something that is material must be connected to that spiritual aspect. It must be integrated with what? With what you choose, how you choose the path from where to where. All right. Number three is the purpose-driven knowledge, is what is called ghaya, is what I say, that to where are you going? So every plant in this garden, all right, serves a purpose. And some of these plants provide shades, offers healing, and some bear nourishing fruits. And similarly, the pursuit of knowledge aims to deepen our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also fulfill our responsibility as stewards on earth, and promote justice and societal well-being. What is that maslahah? Number 4. What the first was Tawhid al-Ma'rifah, number 2 is Takamul al-Ma'rifah, number 3 is Ghaya, number 4 is validation through revelation. And what revelation serves is a map that guides you through this garden, ensuring you stay on the right path. And this map represents, as I said, revelation, serving as the ultimate criterion for evaluating truth. As I said, you have the will to evaluate truth and ensuring that empirical observations and rational thoughts, what? Aligns with divine guidance. What does this show? That shows that human reason is, it has limitations, all right, without the guidance of revelation. All right. Number 5 is holistic methodology of what you call it, manhaj, is to fully appreciate. We go back to the garden, is to appreciate the garden. You engage all your senses, observing the colors, observing and inhaling the fragrances and listening to the rustling leaves. And this holistic approach combines empirical observation, rational reasoning, and spiritual reflection, leading to a comprehensive understanding. And what do you understand by this? You understand man as not only in this world, but it has what? It has an objective on the other part of the world. You see your position in this world, it must be related to the upper world. Okay, that unity of objective, Tawhid al-Hadaf. And every path in this garden, this different path of garden, regardless of its direction, ultimately leads back to the central fountain. And this illustrates what? That all branches of knowledge and human endeavors should ultimately point to the oneness and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through this metaphor, we see that the pursuit of knowledge in Islam is not a fragmented endeavor, but a unified journey, with every step leading us closer and closer and closer to understanding, not just understanding of the creator of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also serving our creator. Okay, so before we discuss technology, we're jumping, I don't know if I have time a little bit. So we must recognize that the foundational process of Tauhidic epistemology starts where transformation begins within ourselves. That is the point, the very, very basic thing. It starts within ourselves. If that doesn't start, it cannot roll on. So what? Belief, that is Iman. Faith in Allah's oneness that creates the foundations for all actions. Number 2, embracement. That is Qabul, this aligning personal intentions and values with Tawheed. Number 3 is purification. That is tazkiyah. You give effort in purifying heart from arrogance, from greed and unethical motives, that to ensure sincerity. And only after this transformation can knowledge be applied ethically and responsibly. And the Quran emphasizes, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. And indeed, Allah will not change the condition of the people until they change what is in themselves. And thus, as individuals, we must embrace this inner journey to ensure that our technological innovations align with divine principles. And thus, technology, what? Must, number 1, be ethical in the light of Tawheed. It must be rooted in the principles of justice, adl. It must be rooted in the principle of accountability, hisba, and it must be rooted in the principle of public welfare, maslaha. And technology must also reflect in the we must also reflect in the use of technology. So technology must also inspire us to reflect on Allah's signs in creation. Okay, I want to speak also a little bit about a video actually I saw yesterday. It was interesting. A scholar or a scientist, he was afraid of AI itself, you know, artificial intelligence, and he was saying that human intelligence can be number two in future. Artificial intelligence is going to control us, and what he is saying is that you know, in AI is like, you know, it's like the brain, all right? It's like the brain. So what they do is that we create learning algorithms, right? And this neural pathways of the AI or the brain itself is created by the AI itself, all right? We give the data and it, you know, it goes these neural pathways and they create codes. And it actually in future, if we if it doesn't if we give one objectives, and if this AI cannot reach that objectives, it will create disruption, all right? And it can create disruption. And this scientist was scared that maybe from this I forgot, from this way that human intelligence can I mean AI can govern human intelligence. But here what we should give importance is is ghaya, okay? That Tauhidic epistemology must be the solution for everything. So if that ghaya is right, AI serves to the right thing. It will go to the objective. You know, it will. I don't know how to explain it. Like if you know, traffic lights, if in what do you call it, in the roadside, all right, if traffic happens and suddenly the AI can like block the roads if they don't achieve this objective. So objective is very important, and it must be based on ethical. It must be based on Tawheed. That's what I'm saying. Even though that they are scared, but we actually control AI in what? In positioning that objective, in maintaining that objective, that it must be aligned with divine guidance. All right. Okay. So I think I'll end my session. And I just want to say that what Tauhidic epistemology is bringing is different from the Cartesian ideology. And Cartesian is bringing that divide between science and religion. And what we are trying to do is bringing that integration between religion and science. It cannot be separated. Everything is one. Everything is going to a path of knowing the Creator and serving the Creator. And that's all. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون. صدق الله العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much. As I said, we have a lot of questions here in the Zoom, but I want to begin by having the question in our room first. So I would like to invite the participant here to share their question. Please be brief, time sensitive, straight to the point. And also to those people who want to respond to the question, we got to be very time sensitive as well, because we want to address a lot of questions here. I'm going to read to you later on. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Let us begin with Sister
Simon. Thank you so much, sir. I'm Saima Ali, and my question is to Dr. Nurul Ain. Ma'am, what standards or criteria should be applied in discussions aimed at pursuing a scientific audience, particularly when addressing a diverse group of individuals who do not adhere to religious beliefs?
Dr. Ain, go ahead.
So you're asking about people who diversity, right? Diversity. So we must apply that that diversity and unity, as we say, diversity and unity. And this does not mean that different opinions are different. You know, that law of when we talk about Tawheed, it's not these particular things. It's beyond. It's a general law that we're talking about. We're implementing something, more generalized. When we talk about Cartesian ideology, it's more into particular things. All right. In this world, when we talk about diversity, it's as I said, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, like 2 + 2 is 4. But when we talk about Tauhidic Epistemology, it's that merging this into a oneness of God. It's you put the lens, how you understand and look at the world, how you understand and harmonize this diversity. And that makes it one in the oneness, in one path. As I said, you choose which one. This one of that mentality, of that lens, brings this diversity into one path.
Thank you, ma'am.
First of all, thank you so much for a really insightful session. So my question is from Dr. Jasser, Auda, and Prof. Murad. Basically, we are talking about Tauhidic epistemology. As Prof. Murad mentioned that IIUM has been working on Islamic epistemology since 80s. So, and also so many works has been done by Prof. Usman Bakar in 2012, as you mentioned. So what is the difference between Islamic epistemology and the Tauhidic epistemology? Because the essence of Islamic epistemology is Tawhid. Can you please explain it?
Yeah,
Thank
clear.
you.
Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would not want to, we can split hairs. We can go into the intricacies of Islamic epistemology and Tauhidic epistemology, but I would put it as the whole exercise is a response. The wider response against a preceding period, historical era over the last 500 years. So what we're doing in the guise of Islamization, in the guise of de-Westernization, in the guise of empowerment, in the guise of alternative knowledge, in the guise of a Tauhidic approach, are all responses in different guises to establish a form of knowledge which conforms to our identity. This is, if you read Prof. Usman, he delves into the relationship between Tauhidic epistemology and identity, and which is similar when we go through the literature of Alatas, Sayyid Nas, and Al-Faruqi, and a few others. All talk about regaining renewing the consciousness of the Ummah and advancing that knowledge as a response to a secular-ridden, a crisis-ridden world post 1500 with the fall of the Catholic Church, which is in this Islam and Secularism, chapter 2, and chapter 1, when Allah has explained what happened to knowledge after the fall of the Catholic Church and how knowledge has evolved. So this, you look at the Tauhidic knowledge, it's to devolve that. In other words, it is to be critical of the evolutionists, one of which is the evolutionist rationalist mode of knowledge production. So I would say that the premise is similar. The premise is the same. Perhaps what we see in Prof. Osman is a more, I would say, a more focused, because I see among the scholars, maybe two scholars, I'm not too sure, but the last time I read Faruqi was 30 years ago. Faruqi was very clinical, very methodological in his steps toward Islamization of knowledge. Whereas Osman is not so much methodological, but more focused on the approach. That's why he called it Tauhidic. So I would not put a fundamental difference, but different perspectives.
Okay, Prof, if I may, just a little bit, because I think his question, is there any conflict between Islamic epistemology and Tauhidic epistemology? Very briefly.
No conflict.
Thank you very much. I would like to, before I go to you, there is somebody online, Abdul Hamid Muhammad. You're welcome, brother, doctor.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
He can hear you. Proceed.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad Al-Ahmadi, for your wonderful moderation style. And thank you, Prof. Jasser, Auda, Prof. Murad, Social Dr. Nurul Ain, and Associate Prof. Dr. Muhammad Nasrin. We have benefited a lot from your interactive session. Thank you very much. I just would like to have short question and also short comment. Dr. Aini, as if you have said, Hisba, when it comes to accountability, if I'm not mistaken, you are maybe talking about Musa'ala, because Hisba means you are volunteer to serve. But here, accountability means Musa'ala or Mas'uliyah, if I'm not mistaken. The short comment when Dr. Murad, Prof. Murad was talking about the identity. In my humble understanding, we need to emphasize on this concept of the ummatic feeling, because nowadays we talk about the ummatic week in UAE, which is based mainly on presenting your culture, your dancing, or your sidab makana, delicious food we have in our countries. So I would suggest this ummatic week to be really named Tauhidic Ummatic Week, because we are emphasizing on how Muslims should be integrated. The concept of Muhajirin and Ansar, we wanted to be actualized in UAE between the local Malaysians and the internationals. So it is not like, also the Dr. Nur Ain also talk about the garden of knowledge and virtue. I also would like to suggest to add Tauhidic, so Tauhidic garden of knowledge and virtue, because virtues, we are not sure which types of virtues, because people might differ. So we want to inculcate the Islamic moral values. So that are, we call Tauhidic garden of knowledge and virtue. Very interesting session. Thank you, Prof. Aziz, Barghut, for organizing this type of seminar. We have learned a lot, but we want to internalize and actualize these concepts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, Dr. Ain.
No, I think there's just suggestions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the suggestions.
Oh, there is no, okay. No, actually we come here and we come to you, Prof. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much. I have a question from Professor Dr. Murad. By stating like two sentences from Professor Nasrin, as he mentioned, the written knowledge is like previously we have been noticing. There is no any like new knowledge, and we are copying previous thoughts and knowledge. So my question is that how Islamic universities develop their curriculum or syllabus by maintaining principles of Tauhidic epistemology while engaging with modern scientific, philosophical, and social disciplines, because we are lagging behind from Europe. So that is my question, sir.
Actually, my question is quite similar in a way. The only thing I want to add is you seem to argue for the Tauhidic epistemology and seem to argue that the West has failed. When we look economically, scientifically, it seems the other way around. So how do we convince others that we have a better product? Then, I mean, criticizing is easy to say, the separation is easy. But the separation seems to have produced a better Europe. Like it or not, more scientific, more economical. So if we want to go back to our answer of this Tauhidic paradigm in a way, we have to actually argue why we are better.
I'm not saying that I'm not making an exceptionalism on Tauhidic paradigm. I'm only explaining the writings and the articulation of Professor Osman Bakar. And also I'm not against it. The point here is simple, that in the construction of knowledge, modern knowledge has been constructed during the Enlightenment period. There was an intersection between the invention of sociology, anthropology, political science to the Enlightenment. And it was there to resolve the problems of Europe. It was not there to resolve the problems of the world. So here, what I mean is that we have taken, not so much of division of knowledge, but we have taken that division of social science, lock, stock, and barrel, without ever questioning it, because there is no space for the sacred in the present corpus of social science. So again, I'm not saying that we should not study, but what I'm saying is that we have to look at it from a certain perspective, a non-Eurocentric perspective, if you like it. Because our perspective should be better, because it tells us about ourselves. You see, when we study sociology, for example, I mean, to put it simply, why would a person from Penang or from from Borneo study Decca, for example? Yeah, true. But if you look at the context of Decca, you look at the idea of the mind, the Cartesian mind, and if you go to the idea of how the non-European things, that Cartesian mind is not universal. So this is where I think we have to, when we talk about epistemology, we have to think about how it reflects ourselves, how it reflects our identity. Because what they study, say anthropology, for example, it's a reflection of their own image. They don't study about ourselves. We don't know. If we study, we don't know ourselves. So this is where I think we need to reproduce the knowledge. I mean, we have to produce a new knowledge. We have to deconstruct the present knowledge. Example, anthropology. Now we talk about Islamic anthropology. To me, Islamic anthropology is a contradiction in terms. Like Islamic Coca-Cola. You know, at one time you have Mecca Cola to criticize. Yeah, Gaza Cola. It's contradiction in terms. It's still cola. So Islamic anthropology is a contradiction, because anthropology itself has the assumptions of anthropology is very much humanistic, looking at man as a social animal. Man has no soul. So again, when I talk about the agency in Western society, the agency is independent of the divine. So when we talk about from a non-Western perspective, we have agency. Agency is our soul, and our soul comes from God. So I refer to my paper on Rumi. You want to learn about anthropology, you study Rumi's corpus. Anyway, but again, to put a label to Islamic social science, Islamic sociology is a misnomer. I think we have to look into various, you have to look at alternative knowledge system, look at things alternatively. And because knowledge has its birth and its death. Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Yeah, knowledge is born and it dies. The discipline of sociology, for example, would not exist forever. In the whole span of human existence, it's only 300 years old. You're talking about millions or thousands of years, only 3,000 years old, 300 years old. It may die tomorrow. Over the last 50 years, you have various challenges to the discipline of sociology, for example. So this is where I think we need to think in terms of what kind of knowledge we have to look into. First of all, conceptualize as to produce an alternative knowledge system rather than go straight into Islamizing. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with Prof. Murad, because in the West also, after the modernism ends, there's postmodernism, actually, in order to challenge modernism. So don't be disillusioned with development, Prof. Now we go to the question here. We have a lot of questions, but I will read to all the panelists the question, and you can choose to answer this. There are two questions from the Muhammad Shazani here. Number one, should Tauhidic epistemology be theory of everything? That's number one. Number two, how could we inquire present cosmology and cosmogony of being Muslim today based on the universal and particulars of Tauhidic discourse? So if you can make up, that is the first question. Now, we go to the longer comment and also a question. Prof. Marazi, present the idea. I think though the sciences were formed into discipline in 17th centuries in the West, but Muslim scholars has long before divided sciences into ulum al-naqliyah and ulum al-aqliyah. Therefore, the question to Prof. Murad is that to suggest that we need to depend on the Western categorization of knowledge into social sciences and natural sciences seem problematic, especially when it comes to integration of knowledge proposed by Prof. Osman Bakar. Because Prof. Osman has clearly explained, there has been integration of knowledge process throughout the history, and therefore, how can we challenge the possibility of Tawhidization now, because the challenge from the Western scholarship may not seem in consonant with our epistemological legacy? More questions will come. Now let us address this two questions first then. Yes.
To the last one. In the modern period, the West has already embarked on what we now are calling integration of knowledge. So it's nothing new. It is not a new concept. The thing new, perhaps, in the modern period is because we talk about it as Muslims and we advocate a so-called Islamic perspective. But if we want to learn and we want to see how things work, we have to read Al-Farabi, Al-Biruni. It was during that period. That period was not enamored by, not encumbered by any form of hegemony. So here we're talking about knowledge production, we're talking about a hegemonic condition. At that time, during the time of Khaldun, Al-Biruni, Al-Farabi, there was no hegemony. So again, our universities must use, say, Muqaddimah as a text and have a courses on Ibn Khaldun or Al-Biruni by itself. We don't have it in UAE. So, okay.
Okay. There is a more question here. Dr. Nurul Ain, what are the standard or criteria should be applied in discussion aimed at persuading scientific audience, particularly when addressing a diverse group of individuals who do not adhere to religious belief? You got the question? Oh, your answer. Oh, sorry. Okay, so there is a question also. What are the achievements of Islamic epistemology over the past 40 years besides being merely defensive? Any comment? Don't ask those people who ask the question. Any observation on the what are the achievements that we have been so far?
We have to at least be thankful to those thinkers who had come before us, especially like people like Prof. Atas, Al-Faruqi, Prof. Kamal Hassan as well, and others who had warned the Muslim world in 1977 about the coming of modernity to their country. so that we are able now to defend ourselves, to defend our identity better. Even though what they say is, they painted a very bleak picture of what will happen if secularism came to our shores. But because of this bleak picture that they painted, we have to be grateful to them, because as a result, we took measures. We took up certain measures to basically save ourselves and our identity. If not, we would probably have lost our identity, probably have lost our religion. Say, for example, in the past, when modernity came, it brought with it westernization, as well as a scientific understanding of the universe. And of course, in the multimedia and so on and so forth, you find programs, and you find all sorts of programs, in the West that are spouting evolutionist theories. But when you come to the Muslim world, because of these warnings that were given by our Muslim thinkers, we have established the Islamic University in many, many countries. And we, from no channel at all, at least I can talk from Malaysia, from no channel at all that focuses on Islam in Malaysia, now we have at least 4 channels. And all the other channels also broadcast and talk about Islam and Islamic values every day in the media. That as a result, people in the 1970s, in the coming of modernity and so on and so forth, they were not wearing the hijab. Today we find hijab as parcel of our life. Muslim thinkers have done a lot, but let's not look at pounds and cents and in that sense. But even then, Muslim world is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And our economy, we can say that is challenging the West. And that's why they are also coming to us. You know how many expatriates are coming and working in Muslim countries now because of our able stability in regards to handling multiculturalism, in regards to handling multi-religiosism, etc. These are all testament that the Quran works, in this 21st century of the modern world, postmodern world, post-truth world, as we say. I think we should be grateful to what has been done, and that's it for me. For Murad, maybe have some more.
Yeah, in relation to that, we must see that collectively that the Enlightenment project is failing, and there are big cracks in Europe now. So European civilization, we talk about the decline of Europe 30 years back, but what we see now is the reinforcement and the visible decline. That doesn't mean that it's good for us. We have to prepare and how we engage with knowledge production, because knowledge production over the last 30 years was superpowered. The 4 or 5 knowledge social science superpowers: Britain, France, Germany, and the US and Japan, the biggest funder. So these are the social science and science superpowers. So if things fall, they collapse, then there must be a vacuum, and we've got to get ready to fill up that vacuum in a proper way. Yeah. Yes.
Because yesterday I was looking at the list of books that are in the West now as bestseller, in regards to books in the West that are now bestseller, New York Times bestseller. One of it is a book on a thinker, 17th century thinker, who was considered to be, a very religious thinker, whose name was Gottlieb Leibniz. Yes. Leibniz tried to look and link science, knowledge, and the world together against the tide of secularism when he was alive, against the tide of enlightenment in his time. That book is now considered to be a bestseller in the West, meaning that there is this movement. Because if you look at philosophical departments in the West, most of them have already closed down because they've not managed to find that wisdom that is required for them to work together and live together like we have in the East, So there is something that is happening there, what Murad is saying, and hopefully it will bear fruits and we'll be able to fulfill that aspect of it, the including of that value system, etc.
Another important thing which I've been repeating many times here, sorry, is the example of economics. We have economics, study of economics in the curriculum, and we have so-called quote-unquote Islamic economics. We pride on the epistemology. But again, the West has taken the step 20 years ago when their students in Britain and the US protested and demonstrated against the economic curriculum, saying that economic curriculum has produced the present problems now and they're accumulates in nature. So again, and this has happened in Muslim countries. Our students do protest to reform and to revamp the economic curriculum because our professors protect the curriculum. So you want to produce an economic system different from the present exploitative capitalist system, then first of all, we have to change the curriculum. We have to revamp the curriculum. In other words, again, I mentioned this now, read Adam Smith and Max Weber as what they were writing. They were writing as priests. They were not writing as economists. So we have to reread the Wealth of Nations. We have to reread the Spirit of Capitalism, Potential Ethics and Spirit of Capitalism. So again, this is where our role here as Muslims and in Muslim university have to do. In fact, close down the economics department.
Thank you. Very good discussion. Let's just check the time. Hang on. Let's check the time, Prof. Are we going to stop at 4:30? I think we are going to closing in 4:30. So there is before we go to you, there is a two online question which is very important. I would like to seek this. Can Tauhidic epistemology be a form of decolonial theory? And is Islamization similar to decolonization? Prof, what do you think?
Yeah, if the consciousness to decolonize knowledge began in the 50s, especially the nexus of independence and liberation, political liberation, and suddenly this newly independent nations think that they have to also liberate knowledge. So what happened was that when the colonials come, they assume knowledge, they created knowledge in their image. That's what you call colonial knowledge. So you have to decolonize that knowledge. So when we decolonize knowledge, we have to fill that up with another form of knowledge. We cannot leave that empty. So I wouldn't say it's similar, but it would complement. In other words, it's a process to continue to fill the vacuum when we decolonize knowledge. For example, when we talk about decolonize knowledge, we're talking about concepts. We're talking about practice, like democracy, for example, or like capitalism. Capitalism is one of the systems and knowledge that have been brought to us by the West through various means. One of which is through colonialism and the system of politics. So again, to amend that and to restructure that is important in terms of how we manage our own country. And again, the nation state is a product of colonialism. Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, and we inherit the boundaries, the colonial borders, or the borders that were created by the colonial system. So how do we dismantle it? Again, this is it's not a unilateral decision, but it's a multilateral decision among Muslim nations.
Prof, if I may interject, how far that we succeeded in doing so? I mean, referring to the after 40 years of colonization, I mean, to what extent that we've been achieved something?
Not much. We are still a colonized state. We are still a state. All Muslim countries are still colonized and are still colonial in their outlook, in their epistemology, in their political system, economic system, and mentally. Exactly. All forms we are colonized.
Okay, so there is another question before I go to the brother. Integration of, I think it referred to Dr. Nasrin, integration of Islamic and Western philosophical source of knowledge. After studying the comparison between Ghazali and Kant, it seems clear that Western epistemology primarily relies on limited number of knowledge sources, often sense, perception, reason, while Islamic scholarship traditionally incorporate four sources: the sense, perception, reason, intuition, or revelation. So given this broader view of knowledge, how can we challenge a reliance on Western philosophical classification when developing our own epistemological system? what would it mean to shift toward more inclusive, integrated model of knowledge that align with Islamic epistemological tradition, such as concept of Tauhidization proposed by Prof. Usman Bakar? Your take.
Last part, the last sentence, the last sentence.
Uh,
The last part. Yeah.
What would mean to shift toward more inclusive, integrated model of knowledge that align with Islamic epistemological tradition, such as the concept of Tauhidization proposed by Dr. Usman Bakar?
Right. Yeah, that's an ongoing project. It's an ongoing project. I think a lot of people have, whenever, we started in looking at various Muslim thinkers and what they have done. And we found out that in the end, I think past 5 to 8 years, we found out that what is missing in the Muslim world is a revival of Islamic epistemology. And philosophically wise, that is what is needed. So what you are saying is basically what is right, what people are doing now. I know a few of my friends in the West who are inclined in philosophy. They are working in this, and try to find out and try to look at not only Ghazali, but look at the philosophy and findings of people like Ibn Rushd and few others. Because there is this conception in philosophy that what was received by Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi is not real philosophy. That was to be corrected by Ibn Rushd. But even then, if it's corrected by Ibn Rushd, not all of it has been accepted yet as part of perception. So there is a very, very deep academic discussion about that, especially when it comes to issues of metaphysics. But what I can say is almost everybody is agreeing that a new type of knowledge should come forward. And Islamic epistemology should really be able to answer some of the questions that are given by people like Immanuel Kant about that access to the noumenon and so on and so forth. Because we have in the Quran various verses of the Quran which says that some of the knowledge are given by God to some individuals, right? So who are these individuals? What do they mean? And can we really conceptualize whatever that they accept? This is also another interpretational discussion within Islam and Islamic thought, which has been done quite a lot also in the West, like people like in Zaytuna College and so on and so forth. If you are inclined towards that discussion, you see it there. But there's also a deep learning curve where you have to study also about the conceptions of kalam and certain principles in kalam in order for you to understand the discussion. But yes, what you're saying is right, but I don't have the answers for you. But yeah, definitely we should respond, and because as I said earlier on, most philosophy departments are closing down in the West because they have not managed to receive that wisdom, not managed to achieve that wisdom that philosophy originally wanted to find out. And of course, the failure of the Enlightenment project made it even worse. For failure of Enlightenment project, you can look at the writings of Alasdair MacIntyre, who's a Catholic philosopher, as well as Charles Taylor, who's also a Catholic philosopher, basically criticized secularism and what has happened in the West. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Dr.
Okay, yeah. Hang on for a while, brother. Let us give away to Prof. Khalid. Yes, Prof. Khalid, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good afternoon to all of you. My apology to not be personally there. I think most of you know the reason. Actually, I don't have a question about Ahmad, but I have a proposal. Let me pick up from the last word from Prof. Dato Murad. He says production of knowledge, actually. So I have a proposal that this short period of 2 hours actually is not enough for the topic and the direction the university is taking over for 5 years. I rather propose to think, with the permission from the dean and then all the speakers, to have an event next year, sometimes like a conference on this very topic that we are deliberating. In fact, let me share with you the production of knowledge. Sometimes what happens is that that's my observation, that Nashistam Gustam Barkhastam. We are sitting, we have a lot of discussions nowadays, but things doesn't go into a concrete form of the knowledge that could be captured and documented. So just is 1 minute, like previous conference in the April, Alhamdulillah, we managed to have about 13 articles, especially in the special issue of Shajara. And our academics, also students in collaboration with supervisors, have been very active in producing that. And this will raise, and also about 9 or 10 articles have gone to this ERA journal, which is Journal of Islam in Asia. And Dr. Ain had been instrumental in producing the EISBN registered proceedings. So this all becomes some tangible output, which would be actually documented. Together, it will raise the profile of research and publication of the ISTAC. I actually put a lot of efforts. Of course, it took a toll on my stress, no doubt about it, and doesn't matter. So, but Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy by the end of 2024, some tangible achievements have been there. So I suggest that Alhamdulillah, we have the great mind now under the roof of the ISTAC, and few more, if the news is correct, coming forward with us. Let us put our teamwork and come up with the rare breed of actually knowledge that could be documented after the conference. But it could not be one-man show. It must have to be as an institutional drive. All the great people here, I don't know whether Prof. Jasser Auda is still connected, because in Canada must be midnight. And Prof. Murad here, Dr. Nasrin, Dr. Ain, Ahmad, the Dean, and many more. Even in Prof. Imtiaz is connected. There I can see. So all these people, why don't we just put as a team together our efforts and energy and come up? Maybe sometimes next year, August, September. For that, what is important now, we need a proposal to be drafted to that effects and approved, because it takes a long process by university to materialize such an event. So this is my proposal, that if you all agree, let us think together and come up with a big event next year, about 2 days, 3 days, bring the all possible brains who are within our own institution or outside world, and let us throw the idea to the world that, hey, Muslim means serious thinkers and serious intellectuals. So with that, the apology for not being there, I'm ready to work with all of you. And inshallah, when they will assess the next year about 2024's research and publication performance, ISTAC will hopefully move 1 notch above. This year, Dr. Ain got the 3rd, but most likely next year, 2nd or 1st position in the research and publication. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad, for the time, and perhaps that may be my humble request to think over it, and we start from now onwards.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good idea. I think everybody here in the room agree with this idea proposed by Prof. Khalik. My apology to brother. I cannot take your question because of the times. I now pass to Prof. Abdulaziz.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I think this is a very good discussion, and it shows that we have to do more and more discussions and discourse, and we deepen our discussion and our approaches to this Tauhidic epistemology and its application. It's not a simple thing. And any simplistic and reductionist approach to understand the Tauhidic epistemology and its implementation will be just another normal exercise. But if you want really to translate the Tauhidic epistemology or the Islamic epistemology into a social context, we really need to look at it from different levels. I just give you an example here. What we are doing here, maybe we can look at the three levels of the Tauhidic epistemology and its implementation. The theoretical and academic discourse, like what we are doing here now. We can discuss, we can develop theories, we can look at concepts, look at philosophy, principles of epistemology. All this is very good. But the challenging level is the institutional and educational level. That's very important. When you talk about an Islamic university, how do you translate Tawheed into the educational system? And it becomes in the curriculum, it becomes in the research culture, it becomes in the nurturing of the whole human being. That these Tawhidic epistemology projects, that's a very important question. And that's where UIE need to go for the second or the next phase after 40 years. The phase of what now, based on this Tauhidic epistemology, we can ask questions like, what are the attributes of a student in a Tauhidic epistemology-oriented university? What are the attributes of this student? What type of student you supposed to nurture in an Islamic university? Now, all our curriculum has educational objective, has learning outcomes, has attributes of the graduate. What is the impact of Tauhidic epistemology on the qualities, attributes, character, behavior, leadership, mind, suluk, amal of your students? So the whole curriculum need to be revisited so that you identify, I am a student going to graduate from a university, Islamic university that adopts Tawhidic epistemology. What kind of skills and competencies, plus the spiritual competencies, the moral competencies, the ethical competencies, which we always talk about, what are your cultural competencies? What are your intellectual competencies? Ijtihad competencies, your innovation, This is actually the implication when you talk about Tawhidic epistemology or Islamic epistemology in an educational context. It means the whole concept of teacher, murabbi, student, all this need to realign again so that a Muslim teacher is not just a person who transfers knowledge to other people, just tells them about what Al-Ghazali said, what Ibn Taymiyyah said, what Auguste Comte said, what postmodernism said. No. A teacher in an Islamic Tawhidic university, first and foremost, he teaches the ilm of the soul, the ilm of tazkiyah, the akhlaq before the information, the character and qudwa before action. So you go, this concept will take you to the deep concepts of the Islamic worldview, starting from istikhlaf, khalifa, the khalifa knowledge, the knowledge that the khalifa needs. So brothers and sisters, in simple terms, when our great scholars were talking, I just recall long time ago, one of our teacher, he didn't have at that time PhD, he's just a teacher. He was telling us 5 concepts. You see the Tawhidic epistemology translated into the layman words and terms and life. He was telling us, you have to combine between these 5 things. Iman, علم عمل تزكية and استخلاف or عمران. That's the bottom line. We need to create a model that links the 5 concepts, because what is Tauhidic epistemology if it doesn't teach Iman and faith and the light of faith as a social, something that makes you a great mu'min, a great Muslim? And what is the benefit of Iman if it doesn't influence ilm? And what is the benefit of ilm or knowledge, which we are talking about, and takamul and ma'rifah, if there is no amal, action, amal, whether in economy or in politics or in society, or, and if there is all these 3, iman, ilm, amal, if they don't do tazkiyah, which is the job or the function of the Prophet. What is the you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم. That's Tauhidic epistemology all here. It's not about just information and ilm and knowledge and memorization, but it's tazkiyah. Tazkiyah is the most close concept to tarbiyah and ta'deeb in our present time. So brothers and sisters, the second level of this Tauhidic epistemology is institutional and educational. How do we come up with that model of tarbiyah, of curriculum, of research, ecosystem? Then we can promote it to the whole world. The third level, which is the most challenging level of this Tauhidic or Islamic epistemology, is actually the universal manifestation of Tauhidic epistemology, so that it will not remain among us, our own people, our own kampong, our own society, our own ummah. The ummah is not for the ummah. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا لتكونوا شهداء على الناس. Witness over other nations, people, civilization. To be a witness over America or Japan, or you need to elevate your ilm, your knowledge, your innovation, your ijtihad, your applications, to their level and above their level, so that you become qudwah. So that's the challenge of Tauhidic epistemology. After we develop our own model, how do we take it to the universal discourse, so that like Al-Ghazali, like Ibn Sina, like Averroes, Ibn Rushd, their ilm become global ilm, universal ilm. That's why it influenced Europe and the Enlightenment. And you read just the book of Sigrid Honka, the sun of Islam shining in the West. You understand how our Muslims, our Tauhidic epistemology, our Islam is a universal. So this is, brothers and sisters, the next, maybe the next forum, we need to address how we really move forward and see the linkages. For your information, there will be a professorial lecture at ISTAC here in December by Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid. The topic is bringing the revealed and acquired sciences in universities. That's your question. Okay, we answered you. Okay, so brothers and sisters, it's a wonderful day today. We have learned a lot. We have started a discourse, and ISTAC always must lead when it comes to Islamic thought and civilization. Our job is to guide, to lead, to show the way. That's the job of this place here, not to consume others' ilm, others' knowledge, others' article. We have to reach the level, we develop the models, we develop the frameworks, we tell people that's the way how you deal with AI, that's the way how you deal with political and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, how we project this institute, and that's how we move forward. I think this is just a start, and we will be having many forums related to what we are talking about today here. And alhamdulillah, I think our professors have captured several ideas of Prof. Usman in his article and also his concept of the 21st century university. There are a lot of things there, maybe more in-depth discussion. Maybe our postgraduate student also can have your forum on Tauhidic epistemology and its implication on your research, on the topics of research, on how we deal with political issues, social issues, environment issues, psychology issues. A lot of things can be done, brothers and sisters, but we need to lead the way and to move forward. At the end here, or in the end, I would like really to thank everybody who come here today. We have more than 100 participants today. 55 of them there, 40 or more here, and many are in the YouTube channel. And from many countries, Pakistan, I was checking the places. This is very great. So we need to move forward. I hope that Dr. Ain maybe and the team can come up with a summary of this lecture or this forum in the points form or infographic form that we can send and disseminate to everybody in IIUM or everywhere in the world. A lot of ideas have been said, but need to be put together, connect the dots, and move forward. And from here, inshallah, we will take it. I would like to thank also Prof. Khaliq and the team, Dr. Ahmad, our great moderator, as always, very energetic. And from time to time, he interjects. And I was really happy to listen to all our scholars. Each one of them addressed one aspect. Wonderful. But as I said in the beginning, we haven't reached yet the real questions and the real challenges that this Tauhidic epistemology must answer, not for only the Islamic Ummah, but for the world, because the world is facing a very critical and very destructive crisis. As you see what happens, you know, in Islam need to answer. But are we there? Are we ready as scholars, our ulama, to debate with the West instead just of blaming the West and talking about the West and questioning the West and the rest, and this look like we are the only people in the world who are okay? On the other hand, Islam is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to solve problems of humanity. But because of the decline of Islamic civilization, decline of the Muslim mind, decline of the Islamic ijtihad, we become in the third place in the world. It's okay. Learn lesson, learn the sunnah of Allah, the laws of God, and let's take another 100 years from now to build that jil or generation of the Islamic civilization of the future. So I think that's the spirit. We cannot solve the problems of the Ummah in 10 years, 20 years, but we are just implanting the right epistemology, the right educational system, the right culture, the right mindset, the right sociology, the right psychology, the right then the next generation will do. And in the end, when all of us do our efforts sincerely with ikhlas, Allah will take us and will give us that civilization or that ummah which we are looking for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ, talks to the Prophet Muhammad, who was a prophet supported by Allah and by Malaika and all this, and he took 23 years to build the human being, the Khalifa that becomes the trigger of the Islamic civilization. ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم. It's Allah that puts barakah in our ilm, in our relation, in our culture, And that barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the key to our success. And that barakah and that support of Allah will not come if you are not sincere, if you are not mukhlis, if you are not mutawadi', if you are not following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say. Allah says in the Quran, لو أن أهل القرى آمنوا واتقوا لفتحنا عليهم بركات من السماء والأرض. لو أن أهل القرى آمنوا, that's the condition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إن تنصروا الله ينصركم. So it's like mathematics. You do this, I give you this. Why the Ummah is not given civilization? Why the Ummah is not united? Why the Ummah is not the number one? Because we don't give what Allah wants us to give. Very simple, brothers and sisters. That's epistemology. The epistemology of Islam must be a practical thing, not a theoretical things only for the philosophers and ulama. But amanu wa amilu salihat. So, brothers and sisters, I give you another lecture. I'm sorry. And with this, I thank you all. May God bless you. And let's end this great forum with reading Surah Al-Asr. Al-Asr. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Let's take a photo together here.